Hello, everyone. Welcome to our presentation today for Any Build and Grow. Um, I would like to, first of all, tell you that we are thrilled that so many of you could attend our webinar series today. And the focus of today's webinar series, as Mr. Hassan already mentioned, is going to be phonics and teaching phonics, specifically with an eye toward online teaching and how we can transfer some of the techniques and strategies that we use in the physical classroom to the online classroom without losing too much of the contact between ourselves as teachers and the students. So if you'll give me 1 second, I'll share my screen with you and we will jump right into the presentation. So 1 minute. Okay, here we go. Okay. Also, just to check, can everyone hear me fine? Everyone can hear me? Great. Okay, and before we begin, also one thing I'd like to say is that during this presentation, whenever I ask you to participate, because I would like you to participate as much as possible, I'm going to ask you please to type your answers or any comments in the chat box, and I will be keeping track of what you are talking about so that we can refer to it as we go along. And then at the end of the presentation, we will go over any questions that you might have. Okay, so chat box, just keep that in mind. Now, the title of the presentation that I'm going to be giving you today is called Remote but Not Distant, Online Teaching Strategies for Phonics. Okay, so the idea here is that even though we are far physically from our students, it doesn't mean that we have to maintain a distance in the way that we teach and the intimacy of our classroom environment. Okay, so this is one thing that we're going to be emphasizing. Now, before we start the actual presentation, let's go over the agenda, and I'll let you know more or less what the presentation is going to consist of today. So the first thing we're going to talk about a little bit is what phonics actually is, because a lot of us teach phonics and we of course have an idea more or less, but there are different ways to look at phonics and different ways to think of the kind of idea or theory of phonics that are better suited to actually teaching it. So we're going to go through that, and I'm going to show you how you can think about phonics in a way that will help you in the classroom. Okay, so after that, we're going to talk about the purpose of learning phonics, why we teach phonics to our students. And then we're going to move into the practical aspects of phonics instruction. So going to talk about teaching phonics. How can we teach it? What are some strategies we can use? Then more specifically, online teaching. And afterwards, we're going to go over some activities and some variations of activities that you can use to get you thinking of how you're going to implement these ideas in the classroom. And then finally, we'll have a wrap up and we'll do a little bit of a quiz to check and see how much of the information you are able to retain. Okay, so first things first, the big question, what is phonics? Now, if you look at the picture that I've chosen here, you will see some things in there. Okay, so I'm going to ask you to please, in the chat box, tell me what you think phonics is based on this picture that you see here. So quick definition, what is phonics? Okay, very good. I see some answers. Tools, a method. Yes, very good. So phonics is a tool for teaching basic reading skills. Okay, so in the past, the way that reading was taught was basically that teachers would sit with their students and they would go through a line of text, a sentence, word by word, and teach them each word individually. But at the same time, the development of phonics really took off as a teaching strategy for students. And now, why is phonics so great, or what's so good about teaching phonics separately from other aspects of language? That has to do with the end goal. The end goal of phonics is to produce independent readers. Okay, so when we teach our students phonics, the goal is to make sure that when they go home, when they leave our classroom, they can pick up a book at the appropriate level, and they can use the skills and the tools from our classroom to read that book or that material independently. And when we've done that as teachers, when we've accomplished this, then this is the end goal of phonics instruction. Okay, so let's do a basic overview and talk about the different aspects of phonics. So phonics teaches students the relationship between written letters or written words and spoken sounds. Okay, so when we talk and when we write, these things are related. So if you look at this picture that I've chosen here, you will see that these characters are all saying hello. But the word hello has many different parts to it. So if we break it down, each letter corresponds to a sound in the word hello. And there are, in this case, there are 4, although there are 2 L's. So if we do this together, and please follow along with me, we're going to say the word hello, but we're going to say it breaking down each individual sound. So first is h, e, l, o, hello. Okay, now what we've done here is we've broken down the word hello into each individual phoneme, which is the word that we use to describe the sounds. So our job is to teach students in the phonics classroom phonemic awareness, how to hear these individual sounds in words, and then later how to combine in their mind the sound that they hear with the letter that corresponds to it. Okay, so phonemic awareness is the ability to hear and recognize sounds, and then to make the mental connection with the written words and letters. They're fairly simple. Okay, now, there are 2 ways in which this happens. Okay, so the first way is we start with the written word. So we see a written word, and here's a student, and he's looking at this word. And now the student is going to sound out each of those sounds. And if you look at the letters above, you'll see that they are in between slashes. And this is how we mark phonemes. So this is how we set each sound apart. So in this case, we have the word cat. So the student is going to read each letter, k, a, t. And finally, this is going to combine into the word cat. Okay, and with the word cat now, they know that they are talking about cat as in an animal, and they can make the connection. So this is what we call decoding, okay? It's the same thing as reading, right? You take a written word, you sound it out, and then you end up with the spoken word and the concept. Now, if you flip that around, what you get is you start with the word, you sound it out, break it into its individual letters, and you get the written word, cat. And this we call, well, this is writing, of course, but we call this encoding. Okay, so very important. When we combine decoding and encoding, right, these 2 fundamental aspects of phonics, what do we get? So let me check the chat box, and please tell me, decoding plus encoding equals what? And let's see what your ideas are. Language, oh, very close. So Miss Sharuk, yes, good writing, letters and words. So actually, the answer here, when you combine decoding and encoding, you get literacy. Okay, so what is literacy? The ability to read and understand what you're reading, and also to write down your ideas using correct language. Okay, and this is what we want. This is the goal of phonics, to make sure that our students are literate. Okay, now, there's actually one more step here. So I actually left something out, something very important, and which you are going to be very familiar with. So if we go back to this picture here, I said something a little bit misleading. I said that first you look at the word cat, you sound out the individual sounds, and then you get the word cat, and then the students should know what that is. But What if our students don't know the word cat? So if we are English teachers, first and foremost, and then we are also teaching phonics, we're going to run into situations where our students might not know the words because they are not native speakers. So what happens if my student doesn't know what a cat is? Well, that means that for us, there's an extra step, and that extra step involves vocabulary. So when we teach phonics, we are not only teaching students how to read individual sounds and individual words, but we're also teaching them the things that these words are pointing to, okay? The things that these words actually mean. So for example, if I right now were to learn the Arabic language, I could maybe learn each of the syllables, each of the consonants and vowels, and maybe I could read it and pronounce it, although it would be difficult. But I wouldn't know the meaning of any of those words. So this is the key point here. As phonics teachers for L2 learners, we are teaching vocabulary and phonics at the same time so that our students can understand the meaning. So just as a reminder, phonics is a tool to read written words using phonemic awareness. With this, you can mentally connect the words to their referents, which are the actual things that we are referring to understand the meaning. Okay, so this is a basic overview of what phonics is, what the purpose is, and what we are doing when we are teaching phonics in the classroom. All right, now let's move on and talk about actually teaching phonics and what we can do when we teach it. So you must all be thinking, or maybe you already know a lot of this, but you might be wondering, so what are some of the techniques that I can use to help my students develop phonemic awareness? The good news is that there are 6 basic principles that we use in the phonics classroom that we can then mix and match in different ways, but fundamentally there are 6, and those 6 are going to be the main ones that you will use to teach phonics. So this is what they are. I'm just going to read them to you, but I'm not going to give you definitions because this would be very boring and not very interactive. So I'm going to give you a quiz, and I'm going to see how many of these you can identify, okay? But before we start the quiz, let's go ahead and read through them. So the 6 principles are substitution, addition, deletion, association, segmenting, and blending, okay? Now, let's start our quiz. So here, you'll see a very typical phonics activity, okay? What I want you to do is I want you to tell me which of the 6 principles does this activity involve, okay? And I'm going to check the chat box. So let's see how many of you got it. Aha, so all of you are pretty much correct. Yes, that's very good. So most of you are saying blending. Let's see. Yes, okay. In fact, it is blending. All right, so blending is one of our key principles here, where we are teaching students that when we put the individual sounds together, they make a certain sound, right? B and L together, B, L, bl. Okay, so this is called blending. Now, how about this one? What do you think? So we've got 4 words here: sun, snail, sand, snake. What do we call that? So someone here says initial sound. Someone said association. Aha. So that is actually correct. Yes, the answer is association. What we're doing is we are training students to hear the sound of the letter S in many different words so that they recognize that whenever they see the letter S, that is going to make the sound S. Okay, sun, snail, sand. All right, very good. So the next one. Okay, here we've got some words and then we're doing something to those words. So what do you think the answer is? Someone says addition, substitution, segmenting. We've got all kinds of different answers. Okay, let's check. Let's check what our answer is. Whoop. Okay, so the answer here is substitution. And as you can see, what we're doing is we're taking the letter in the first word, or one letter in the first word, and we're changing it. We're substituting it so that the students understand that the other parts, the consonants in the word, stay the same, but that vowel change makes a different word. It has a different sound, so they can learn to mix and match. So the next one, this one is pretty straightforward, I think. Let's see, what do you guys think? What's the answer here? Yes, that's very good. The answer is deletion. What we're doing is we're taking away letters, and then we're going to see what they sound like when we take the letter away. So in the first example, we have the word nut. We're going to take away the N, and that's going to say ut, right? Okay, very good. Now here, we've got an exercise where we're going to break down each word into its individual phonemes or letter sounds. So what is this called? Aha, very good. So everyone is saying the same thing. We're all on the same page here. This is segmenting. Very good. And the last one, what do you think this is? Yes, very good. This is addition. Okay, so we're going to be adding letters to complete the words. All right. So thank you very much for participating, guys. And now, just the only thing that you have to really keep in mind here is that with these 6 principles, you have everything you need. You have the foundation of every activity that you will do in your phonics classroom. Now, the important thing, or I guess the challenge, is to try and think of how you're going to take these 6 principles and make them fun and interesting and come up with different ideas to teach your students. All right. So let's move on to the online classroom. Okay, so teaching online. When you think of changing or moving from the physical classroom to the online classroom, or when you were told that you were going to be teaching online, I'm sure many of you were nervous and you thought, oh my God, this is going to be very complicated because teaching online is very different. I don't have a direct face-to-face interaction with my students. I don't really have control over what they're doing. And so this is going to be very tough. And in a way, you're right. But luckily, in a way, the online classroom is not so different from the physical classroom. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to talk to you about some of the similarities that they share and how you can think about these similarities and use them to your advantage when you're teaching your class. Okay, so the online classroom is similar to the physical classroom in 3 key ways. The first one is organization. Okay, your online classroom is going to be organized in a very similar way to your physical classroom. And what I mean by organization is how you structure your lesson from beginning to end. Okay, so usually when we teach, we start our class with some kind of introduction, then we give our students the new material, then we do some practice, play some games. So this is going to be very similar, almost the same, pretty much. Then the pacing. Okay, so the online class, the classroom is going to, or an online lesson is going to have go on for the same amount of time as a physical classroom lesson, right? So in the same span of time, you're going to fit your activities and you're going to give your students time to practice. So the pacing is going to be very similar also. And finally, interaction. Okay, so yes, you are far from your students, but that doesn't mean that you can't interact with them. And there are some really fun ways that you can get your students involved, even though they're not directly in front of you. Okay, so now let me ask you, so how many of you have seen or used something like this? Okay, and question number 2 is, what is this? So who can tell me? I'm going to check the chat box. what is this picture? Or what is this a picture of? Okay, a timetable, a focus wall, the steps, a to-do list. Okay, this is very good. A daily schedule, exactly. Perfect. Okay, so yes, this is more or less a daily schedule for what we are going to do in our class. Now, this looks like it is something for an elementary school teacher, and these are the different subjects that the teacher will be teaching during the day. But the idea is pretty much the same. So even if we are only teaching phonics and we have one lesson, we can create a kind of organizer or a schedule to not only remember how we are going to teach our lesson, but to give the students an idea of what the lesson is going to be like, so that we can help them transition throughout the lesson and give them an idea of the expectations that we have of them. So let's talk about what the important points are here when we are thinking about classroom organization. Now, routines. So the routine helps to orient our students. Okay, when we move from section to section, it gets them to focus, it grabs their attention, and it tells them, okay, we are done with this, now we are going to move to this, so that they can kind of get ready in their head to move on to a different activity. Okay, it also clarifies expectations. So now I expect you guys, the students, to get ready to do this other task. And yes, it gets their attention as well. So after you finished an activity, sometimes the students don't know what to do, so their attention drifts somewhere else. If you have made it clear that our class today is going to involve this, this, and this, then it's going to be easier for you to manage them. Okay, now, some things to keep in mind. So it's very important that you announce every step to help guide your students, okay? So not only are you going to show them the daily schedule, but you're going to announce it to them, and then you're going to basically preface every part of the lesson by referring back to the schedule. I'm going to show you something kind of fun that you can do with this, okay? Another important thing to keep in mind is that you should always, always, always model the activities before you do them, especially with young learners who are learning phonics. A lot of times our students are not native speakers of English. So when we explain what the activities are going to involve, we have to be really conscious of how we are modeling it for them so that they understand what we want them to do. And finally, have students practice a routine. So every day, if you are using the same routine over and over, your classroom is organized in the same way, then students will get an idea that when they come into the phonics classroom, this is what we always do. We always do these activities in this order. So I have this routine that I'm used to, and I know what I should be doing, okay? So bear this in mind. These are some things that will help you make sure to keep the students focused, and also to help them fit into the different tasks in the classroom. Okay, so now when we're looking at this other daily schedule, the previous one, it looks a little bit boring maybe if you show it to your students. They might not be that interested, right? So what I've done here is I've transformed it into what I want to call a phonics adventure. Okay, it's exactly the same principle. The only difference is that I've called it an adventure, and I've taken this picture of a map. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell my students, okay, good morning, everybody. Now, are you ready to go on another phonics adventure? And then I'm going to explain what that entails. So, okay, first, we're going to sing our daily song. Okay, so many times in the classroom, you start by singing some kind of song to get the students prepped and ready to do the actual work, right? So I'm going to explain to the students that we're going to start with our song, and then we're going to walk over to the Learn New Words and Sounds activity. And here, this is where I'm going to teach my students a new information from whatever unit we're working on in the book. And then after that, we're going to have some practice. Okay, when we finish our practice, we're going to take a rest in the cabin here, and we're going to have some fun and play a game. And then after that, we're going to review what we've done. And finally, we're going to wrap up the lesson. Okay, so now if you are my students, you already know, you have an idea of all of the different things that we're going to do today, and it's going to make it a lot easier for you as a teacher to move from section to section and keep the students engaged. Okay, now, when it comes to the daily song, so in most classrooms, teachers usually start with something like a good morning song. And of course, it's very important that you teach the lyrics to the students and tell them what it means so that they actually understand and can get into the song. Here, for the phonics classroom, there are lots of different phonics songs that you can use. I mean, you can look on YouTube, or depending on the book that you're using, usually you might be able to find an actual song. So in this case, let me go back here. I'm going to play part of this song that we use for you guys to see how it looks. Oh, what happened here? Wait, sorry. Okay, so you have an idea more or less of what a daily song would look like, and you can choose. It's up to you if you want to make it phonics based or if you want to make it more general. But it's good to get the students kind of blood flowing and get them ready to start learning. Okay, so another thing you can do is after you complete each of the different parts of your lesson, you can check them off. Okay, and this will give the students a sense of achievement, right? So we've done this all together. Yay, good job, everybody. Wonderful work. Now let's walk across the bridge and let's get to our next phase of the lesson, learning new words and sounds. Okay. So another thing about teaching phonics is that inevitably you are going to have to teach your students new words. And in the classroom, of course, you have flashcards like these where you have a picture and a word. And you can do lots of different things when your students are right in front of you. However, in the online classroom, it's a little bit different. There's not a lot of tactile learning that you can do with your students, right? You can't have them come up and grab the cards and hide them or touch them. So you're kind of limited, right? You're just going to show them the cards and that's about it. But luckily, that's not necessarily the case, right? There are lots of things you can do. So here, I'm going to show you, this is a video that introduces the new songs to the students. And so what I want to do is I want you to look at this, and then I want you to tell me in the chat box afterwards what you would do with this video or how you would use this in the classroom to teach the students. Okay, so 1 second.
Nap. Nap.
Oh. Okay, so as you've seen, right, this is a really useful tool because it lets you as a teacher kind of move to the side. It gives the students something to look at and it gets them involved. They can follow along and it kind of guides them, right? It gives them each sound, n, ap, nap, shows them a picture, right? Now, as a teacher, what I want you guys to tell me is, how would you use this in your classroom? What would you do with this? Would you just show it, or what would you do? So just go ahead and tell me. I see someone said we can use it for struggling students, and this is a very good point. We can teach blending and guide them to the sound. Yes. We can show it and make the students repeat it. Of course, this is excellent, and this is what we want to do with this. And then we can use it also for pronunciation. Now, somebody here said something interesting. Wait a minute. Somebody said we can, 1 minute. So somebody said we can make jumping movements with the sound, right? We can have our students use their bodies, and actually this is exactly what I'm going to talk about. So when you do these kinds of activities, right, and your students are at home in front of the computer, we want them to actually use their bodies, okay? We want them to stand up and move around, and this is going to be fun for them, number one, but number two, it's also going to get them more involved, and so that they're not just looking at the screen, bored and passive, right? We want them to be active and to be engaged in learning. So 3 things you can do. The first one is air writing. And basically what air writing is you show the students the word, or you pause the video, or you hold up the card, and then you tell them, okay, everybody, I want you to put up your finger, and we're going to write this word together, and each letter we write, we're going to make the sound, and then we're going to say the word. So let's do this together, you and I. Ready? So this word is hat. H, A, T, hat. Okay, and what does that look like? It's a hat. Now I'm going to show it to you again, and you're going to tell me what this is. What is this again? This is hat. Okay, so that's air writing. Table writing, same idea. And with table writing, you can even have students do actual writing, although we'll talk about that a little later. But table writing is using your finger on the table to write the letters for practice. And finally, arm tapping. So arm tapping is not only arm tapping, but you can do this with your feet as well. Each individual sound, you can make noise to identify how many of the phonemes you hear. Okay, so with that in mind, what I want you to do is, I'm going to play this video again. And for every letter, I want you to clap your hands. Okay, everybody? So here we go. I'm going to play the video, and you're going to clap your hands for every letter that you hear. Okay, let's do this together. I'm going to show you how it's done, and then we're going to do it.
Nap. Nap.
Okay, so I would show the students n, a, p, nap. Okay, and then I would do it again and have them follow me. And of course, I'm modeling it so that they know what they're supposed to do. And then we do it together. Okay, now this is very simple, but at the same time, the fact that they're doing something with their body means that they are actively engaged. They're not just looking at the screen. And this is actually, so there have been studies that have shown that when students are engaged actively in learning, they perform better on different kinds of tests, and not only actual written tests, but tests to confirm that they have actually retained the information. So we can do these very simple techniques, and this will help them learn. Okay, and then, of course, this plays into the idea of learning styles. Okay, so how many of you have seen this before? In the chat box, very quickly, tell me if you've seen it, yes or no. So just say, I've seen it. And I want to get an idea of how many people have seen it. Yes, yes. Okay. So a lot of you guys have seen this, and this is very good because this is actually very important, and especially for online learning, right? So our students learn in lots of different ways. There are 4 main ones, right? And the four of those are visual, which has to do with sight and pictures. And then we have auditory, which is listening, speaking, communicating, right? And we have reading and writing. So students can also learn by reading individually, independently in books. And finally, kinesthetic. Okay, so lots of students learn very well when they can actually touch or use their bodies, and this helps them form memories, which will then help them to reproduce what they've learned. Okay, so these four principles, if you keep this in mind when you are planning your activities in the phonics classroom, this will be very helpful to you. Okay, now let's move on and talk about actual activities and how we can tie all of these different things together that we've talked about. Okay, so we're going to talk about blending and segmenting activities. I'm going to give you two examples. I'm going to give you two examples of substitution, addition, and deletion activities that you can do. And finally, association activities. So let's get started. The first one that we're going to talk about is called the drive-through. Okay, so the drive-through is a blending activity or a segmenting activity, depending on which way you do it. But the idea is very straightforward. So I'm going to show you a word, right, everybody? So this is a hat, right? And then I'm going to ask my students to read each letter individually, then the whole word, hat. Okay, now I've got this small whiteboard here. If you can get your hands on one of these, it will be massively helpful. So please try to find a way to get one of these for your online classroom. This is very useful. And basically what I'm going to do is the exact same thing. So I've got my letters here and I've got my car. So this is a skateboard, but let's pretend that it's a car. And I'm going to explain the lesson to the activity to my students like this. I'm going to say, okay, everybody, so here is a word, but the word is broken. Now, I've got this car and the driver is going to help us make the word, but he needs your help. Oh. So he needs your help, and every letter that we drive to, I need you to make the sound. Okay, so let's do it together. First, watch me. So, ah, and then at this point, students will get it, so they can say this one themselves, and then we can actually go ahead and do it. So ready? Let's do it together. And I want you guys, even though you're muted, I want you to go ahead and do it with me. Okay, ready? So, ah. Okay, and this driver, what word did the driver make? Hat. Okay, very good. So this is one very simple way to make a segmenting activity funner and a little bit more interesting with some tools that will get the students' attention, right? Okay, now another example or another activity that we can do is called puppet time. Okay, so before we start with the puppet time, let me just go ahead and ask you guys, how many of you have used something like this before? So just say yes in the chat box if you have. Okay, I see some yeses here, some yeses, some no's, lots of yeses. Okay, very good. So now for segmenting, right, the idea is very simple. We're going to introduce our character. So this is a tiger. His name is Hobie. And Hobie has a problem. Hobie wants to talk, but he cannot say the whole word. He can only say the sounds. So it's very hard to understand Hobie. But here in the phonics classroom, we are very good at phonics, so we can translate what Hobie is saying, right? So, Hobie, I'm going to show you this picture, and I want you to tell me what this is. And Hobie is going to say, it's a hat. Hobie, what did you say? I couldn't understand you. Class, what did Hobie say? What is this? And then the class should say, hat. Okay, so in this way, the students are translators for our puppet, and we're giving them a task, an active role in this game that we're playing. And this is a way to get them to do a segmenting activity, but that makes it more fun, more interactive, and really gets them involved. Okay, so let's move on and let's look at some substitution, addition, and deletion activities. So here we have something called the letter switch. I'm sure you've seen this and you've probably used this in your classroom before, right? Now, when we are doing this in the online classroom, we can do a very basic kind of letter switch, which is writing it on the whiteboard. So I'm going to write a word, and then you're going to read it to me. I'm going to switch a letter, and you're going to read it again. So let's go ahead and let's go with this. Okay, so let's go ahead and read it. Everyone, what does that say? And you should tell me it says bug. Or you can actually call an individual student to read it for you. And then from that student, you can move on to other students. Now I'm going to erase a letter and I'm going to write a new one. And I want you to tell me what it says. Okay. Okay, everybody. So what does that say? And that says bag, right? Now, that's very straightforward, very simple, and you can do this for a few iterations, and it might get a little boring. But one thing that you can do is you can actually have your students write with you. And this is something that could be fun and interesting for them, and it also gives them something to show for what they've learned, right? So let's say we do this. So we've told our students what this is. This is the word bug. Now I'm going to cross out a letter and give you a new letter to replace it. And I want you to write the word underneath, okay? And everybody's going to do this on a sheet of paper on their desks in front of them, and then they're going to hold it up so that the teacher can see, right? So I'm going to cross out this letter, and I want you to change this letter to this letter, and I want you to write the word here, okay? So students are going to write, and then I'm going to write it too, and we're going to say, okay, ready? On the count of 3, I want all of you to hold up your words or your writing or your piece of paper. 1, 2, 3. And then I'm going to check and see that my students wrote the same word, and we can keep this game going. We can substitute vowels or consonants. Right here, I'm going to change the G into a D, and my students should write bad. And each time we're going to read out the word together, and I'm going to unmute them to make sure that they're actually reading. Okay, now what's our next activity? Aha, tell me when to stop. So this is actually a really fun one. So before we were talking about kinesthetic learning, which is using the body. So there's a really fun game that you can do with this activity, which is the following. So let's say we've got our word hat. What we can do is, so I've left out a letter here, and I'm going to write the vowels at the top. So A, E, I, O, U. Okay, and I'm going to tell my students, all right, everybody, here is the word hat, but it's missing a letter, and I need you to help me find the right letter. And this is what we're going to do. I'm going to point to each letter, and you're going to jump when I find the correct letter. Okay, so let's do this. I'm going to point, and if it is wrong, just shake your head like this, okay? And if it is correct, I want you to jump up and say the sound, okay? In this case, it's ah. So let's do it together. Ready? Everyone, is this the correct letter? No. How about this one? Does this say hat? No. Okay, we're going to keep going. And then when we get here, the students should jump up out of their seats and say ah. And then I'm going to say very good. So that, what does that say? That says hat, etc. Right? Okay. And one more thing, actually, with the car game. So there's one thing that you can do with the car game that gets the students moving as well. So it's a little bit more complicated, and this you can do with students who are more familiar with these kinds of activities and who've been doing phonics for a little while, right? So let's say that we've got a 3-letter word, and our word, again, hat. Let's use hat for demonstration purposes. So we've got our driver. Our driver wants to go home, okay? But our driver needs to follow the map. Now, to get home, the driver needs to take a route, and our route is going to be as follows. So here we have H, O, T, L, no, maybe M, N, P. So this is very messy, and excuse me, but when you do it, of course, you can make it beautiful and take a little bit of time. And while you're writing this out, you can give students something to do so that they don't get bored, and maybe you can have them sing some kind of song or play a Simon Says game. So a lot of times what you can do as you're switching from one activity to the other is call out things for students to follow, right? Simon says, touch your head. Simon says, touch your shoulder. Simon says, jump. Simon says, etc., right? So now when you're finished, it'll look something like this. And again, excuse me, it's very messy, but the idea is as follows. So you've got your car, and you have to help this car get home. But there are 2 houses. It's very confusing. So the way to go home is to make the word hat. Now, I'm going to ask my students, okay, so you are going to tell me if the driver should go left or right, okay, to make the word hat. Now, I'm going to ask you guys, and even though I can't see you, I'll imagine that you're telling me the answer, but I want you to, with your arms, I want you to gesture left or right. Okay, everybody? So we've got the H sound. Now, where should I go? Should I go left or right? And then the answer, of course, is I should go right. Okay, that's very good. So we've got H, A. Okay, nice. Now, from here, should I go left or right? And the answer should be right. And you should be pointing this way. And then our driver got home safely, so good job. Thanks for playing, and we can do this a few iterations. And you can even prepare something like this beforehand so that you're not having to constantly draw it, and that'll make things a lot easier. But this kind of game gets the students involved with their bodies, and again, it gets them to think a little bit more critically, moving beyond just saying the sounds and recognizing the letters. They're doing other things and integrating this knowledge in a different way. Okay? So, one last activity that we have is for association. And this is called in the bag. So I'm not going to demonstrate this because I don't have a bag, but the activity is pretty straightforward, as you can see, and you can do this very easily, right? So you have 3 bags, and then you have words, and this is for the very first level of phonics, okay? This is for the vocabulary part of phonics instruction, where you're getting students to just associate the first letter of a word with the actual word. So you have some letters and you show the students pictures, and they should tell you which of the bags the letter goes in. You can set up a table with bags and you can put the cards in, and of course, it's more fun and more entertaining than just calling out the letters, right? Okay, so that is it for all of the actual content part of the lesson, right? We've talked about what phonics is. We've talked about how we can apply phonics principles in the classroom, and especially in the online classroom, how we should be thinking about making our lessons more interactive and getting our students to use their bodies so that they're not just staring at a screen. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to ask you some questions about the presentation just to make sure that you guys have got all of this stuff down. So, sorry. What did we learn? We learned that phonics is a tool to teach phonemic awareness. So what else did you guys learn? In the chat box, go ahead and just write down anything that you remember from this presentation so far. So 6 basic concepts. Excellent. Yeah, principles. Perfect. Phonics is meant to produce independent readers. Very important. Yes. How to interact with kids. Great. Make sure that it's not boring. Yes, this is fundamental. Yes, make it more interactive. Phonics teaches literacy. How to make teaching fun. Okay, very good. So let's go on and see what else we've got here. So phonics is an important step in the process of achieving literacy, right? We want to teach our students decoding and encoding so that they will be literate. And the end goal is for them to be able to do this independently so that they can associate words with meaning and they can go ahead, go home and read. Now, the 6 basic principles for teaching phonics, let's see how many of them you can remember. So in the chat box, write them all out. What are they? The 6 principles. I hope I can remember them all. I'm not sure if I can. So we've got substitution, deletion, blending, segmenting, addition, and what else? There was another one. Yeah, blending, segmenting, addition, association. Aha. Okay, nice. Thank you. And there they are. Now, how can we manage our online classroom? Okay, so we have to create a good routine, model every step for our students. And what techniques did we use to make students feel more engaged? So let's see. What were some of the things that we used to help students feel more engaged? Start with a song. We used a timetable. Yes, a routine. We had a puppet show. Arm tapping. That was also very good. A map, right? That was the way that we made our routine more interesting. Characters, songs, flashcards, clap to the letters. Okay, very good. Jumping, yes. All right. The answer to that is, and 4 types of learning styles. So I think one thing that you should take away from this presentation is that when we are teaching phonics, we often think, okay, sounds, letters, yes, visual and auditory, but that doesn't mean that we can't also include other types of learning to get our students to experience this the phonics classroom in a different way. And especially when we're teaching online, it's very important that we keep our students motivated and engaged so that they don't lose focus and they don't feel that because they're not in a physical classroom, that what they're doing is not as important, right? So thank you very much, everyone. And I hope this has been helpful to you. And I really hope that when you go back to your online classroom, you can use some of these tips and techniques, or at least that this will help you get the juices flowing and help you think about how you're going to teach the kids this really important and fundamental tool. Thank you very much.